remote, beautiful, mysterious, unique islands of worlds of their own. Places apart where life has evolved differently, but in our own modern interconnected world, islands also part of a global community that's changing for better or for worse. In this video, we're exploring climate change and how it affects the Fijians. No matter how distant they are from the mainland, islands can't separate their futures from their fate of humanity as a whole. In many ways, these shores are a front line of global change. What happens here happens to us all.
And we're back. Thank you for tuning in to Tropical 108. I'm Raquel, and today we have special guest Madison, a local native of Fiji.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Madison, could you tell me how the impacts of climate change have made you vulnerable?
Well, being a woman here in Fiji makes me very vulnerable to the effects of climate change. I am the main provider of food and water for my family. So when tropical storms hit our villages, it makes it very hard to be the provider that I need to be for my children.
欢迎收听 Team 5 Make It Rainforest， 这里是 FM101， 我是今晚的 DJ 小宋宋。我们今天要讨论的是斐济。Fiji consists of over 332 islands. 110 of them are being inhabited. The average year-round temperature is 68 Fahrenheit to 80.6 Fahrenheit. Fiji is a developing country with a large subsistence agriculture sector. There is little or no surplus left for trading.
Hi, this is Yuxiang, and right now I'm talking about the El Nino and La Nina. And the climate of Fiji varies significantly yearly. In the summer, the weather is dry and hot, and from November to April, Fiji is hit by several tropical cyclones. So, the next part.
One of Fiji's vulnerabilities would be agriculture, and agriculture would be a social, economical, and ecological dimension. Agriculture is a hazard because in an article it stated that sea level rise, seawater intrusion into freshwater supply, soil erosion, and decline in water supply are likely to impact coastal agriculture. So it's a hazard, and it really impacts the agriculture of Fiji. And for exposure, obviously, Fiji's large agricultural sector is very important to their economy. And for sensitivity, the way of life really for all the people of Fiji would be largely impacted by the loss of land and revenue from the agriculture. Another vulnerability is tourism, and that would be an economical and social dimension. The hazard for tourism is that tourism provides 31% of employment in Fiji, and intense tropical storms, sea level rise, and coral bleaching are all threats to the tourism industry. In Fiji's economy, tourists, and employees are all exposed by this vulnerability. For sensitivity, as Fiji's second largest industry, the decrease in tourism would have drastic effects on the entire country as a whole. And then another vulnerability is the overuse of resources, and that would be a political, social, and ecological dimension. The hazard The article also stated that marine biodiversity is endangered by unsustainable fishing practices, overfishing, and the use of alien species. So for exposure, coastal and marine environments would be exposed, and also the fishermen. And sensitivity, Fiji's coastal and marine environments are very important to tourism, transport, and food provision, so this would have a big impact on their country.
Highlighting a couple more vulnerabilities regarding Fiji comes from its energy sector and ocean acidification. Fiji has over 332 islands, and due to the sea level rise, some of those islands face potentially not being there. And they're abundant in many resources Fiji could use for energy. Exposure wise, the government and economy and environment of Fiji would be affected, and since the sensitivity would be pretty severe for Fiji, because as a developing country, Fiji is reliant on any natural resource its islands possesses, which they're abundant in wood and water and other resources Fiji could use to create energy. As far as an environmental aspect is ocean acidification, and it's been increasing due to carbon dioxide, which is absorbed by the oceans. And as this extra carbon dioxide reacts with seawater, it causes the ocean to be more acidic. And organisms and corals are critical to Fiji's tropical reef ecosystems.
However, Fiji also gained opportunity from climate change. The Fiji government started focus on reforestation, which will bring more trees back to the islands. The trees can help absorb the carbon dioxide, which can reduce the greenhouse effect. The tree also can attract more tourists, which can help to improve Fiji economic. At the same time, the other island countries who also suffer from sea level rising are buying islands from Fiji for their domestic. This will prove a financial asset to help the Fiji government to deal with climate change and its own poverty.
Fiji's future. First, temperature will continue to increase in a range of 0.4 to 1 degree Celsius. Second, days will continue to get warmer and warmer. Third, rainfall patterns will change. There will be a decrease in dry season rainfall and an increase in wet season rainfall. Also, more extreme rainfall days will occur. Fourth, less frequent but more intense tropical cyclones. There will be an increase in the average maximum wind speed of cyclone by between 2 to 11% and an increase in rainfall intensity of about 20% within 100 kilometers of a cyclone center. Fifth, sea level will continue to rise in a range of 3 to 16 centimeters. 6. Ocean acidification will continue, causing coral bleaching, storm damage, and fishing pressures.
So I'm curious, how important is tourism to your country?
Tourism is very important to Fiji. It brings in a lot of money and provides a lot of jobs. People from all over the world come to see our beautiful islands and beaches, but with the recent rise in temperature and sea level, it has started to destroy our beaches and coral reefs, which takes away the beauty from the land. And if the trends continue, we will begin to lose money from our economy that we desperately need.
Hi, it's me again. It's about talking about the economy before the industrial revolution and the economy after the industrial revolution. And so here you can see all the things in the slide.
Fossil fuel emissions in Fiji. Fiji has very less fossil fuel history. The reason is obvious, which is because it is a tiny island and it doesn't need that much fossil fuel to maintain the operation of the country. The carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel increased from around 33,000 metric of carbon in 1950 to around 434 in 2011. Although Fiji's contribution to greenhouse gas emission is insignificant in global terms, there is, however, formal recognition and appreciation of the significance of global warming. The current focus of attention in Fiji is primarily on the problem of black smoke emissions from diesel vehicles.
Deforestation in Fiji. Deforestation began over 3,500 years ago when the first native Polynesian and Melanesians inhabited the islands of Fiji, and over 55% of Fiji's land is covered by dry forest. The land became cleared for commercial agriculture and sugarcane production with the beginning of the British colonization, and as the population grew, forests were degraded and used for agricultural expansion, urban development, and logging. Deforestation has many consequences. It results in loss of habitats for many species, loss of resources, flooding due to loss of forest area, erosion of land, and the release of CO2 gas into the atmosphere. And a fact that I found is that deforestation can emit roughly 16% of global warming greenhouse gases. However, with the regulation of timber licenses and the agreement of land rights between the government and indigenous Fijian communities, that can really help to mitigate deforestation.
Fiji's dominant lifestyles and groups. The first one is sugarcane industry. This industry contributes approximately 7% of GDP, brings in 22% of the total export earnings. About 20% of Fiji's population relies directly on the sugarcane industry for its livelihood. Farmers make a profit of $13.14 a ton of sugarcane. Land and water supply are polluted by pesticide and chemical use in the sugar. The second one is fishing industry. This industry contributes about 2.8% to GDP and 9.7% to total export earnings. 50% of rural households are involved in subsistence fishing. Some adverse fishing practice leads to pollution and damage to the marine environment. Increased competition from foreign vessels leads to overfishing. The third one is mining industry. This industry causes water and atmosphere pollution and dries up domestic water supplies. It contributes about 3% to GDP, and virtually all of it from gold. Workers in this industry have suffered serious health problems such as shortness of breath, nose, and throat infections.
For vulnerable population in Fiji, we got women. They suffer from crime. Poor, they suffer from disease. Indigenous people, they have to migration due to climate change. And local sugar crop farmer, they are reducing potential production due to the higher temperature.
When it comes to the decisions Fiji has to make, I think the biggest one would be its efforts in reforestations, because trees are abundant and part of the environment of Fiji, and trees naturally absorb CO2. More trees means less CO2 being released to the atmosphere. However, a big con would be reforestation efforts could potentially reduce the land available for farming, which is very crucial to Fiji's economy, especially products like sugarcane. And I Another big one is Fiji should educate its people on climate change concepts, mostly because the population isn't well educated enough on these topics, and every majority town in Fiji is located along the coast. If the people of Fiji are aware and educated on the effects of climate change, like sea level rise, people will respond to them much more effectively. However, educating the people of Fiji on a community level such as this requires some time and financial resources. So Fiji would need aid at that part.
So I'm curious, how important is tourism to your country?
Tourism is very important to Fiji. It brings in a lot of money and provides a lot of jobs. People from all over the world come to see our beautiful islands and beaches, but with the recent rise in temperature and sea level, it has started to destroy our beaches and coral reefs, which takes away the beauty from the land. And if the trends continue, we will begin to lose money from our economy that we desperately need.
So why is Fiji even worried about climate change? Well, as a small island developing non-Annex 1 state in the South Pacific, Fiji is very vulnerable to climate change impacts, even though it only emits 0.04% of greenhouse gas emission. The Fijian communities are experiencing climate change impacts such as shortages of water, outbreaks of vector-borne diseases, sea level rise, and eroding shorelines and riverbanks. This is why the Fijian government recognizes the importance of adapting to these climate change-related adaptation policies.
Welcome, Terry. This is DJ Xiaosong again. I will talk about Fiji's history in UNFCCC right now. The Republic of Fiji ratified the UNFCCC in 1993 and thus became legally obligated to adopt and implement policies and measures to mitigate the effects of climate change and to adapt to such changes. The second national communications to the UNFCCC follows and builds on the initial national communication submitted in 2005 and has been prepared in fulfillment of Fiji's obligations to the UNFCCC under Articles 4 and 12. 感谢 Terry 送的仙女棒。
Fiji's climate change platform. The launch of the National Climate Change Policy was in 2012, which provides direction on national priorities and positions regarding climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. And that plan included 8 climate change priorities, including mainstreaming, data collection, storage, and sharing, raising awareness, education and training, adaptation, mitigation, financing, and gaining international and Pacific participation.
Due to the trust issue between non-Annex 1 country and Annex 1 country, the only agreement Fiji made in Kyoto Protocol is to have a more advanced measure system for climate change, which assists by Canadian government.
Hello Terry, this is Yu Xiang again, and I'm right now talking about environment in CDM, REDD plus and GI, and also here I'm as usual, and I'm not talking about any content here, and also I want to tell you about another part that I need to talk to you. It's a cost of recommendation here. There are 2 parts here. One is ecologic mutual cycles, and the other is basis.
Fiji's contributions and adaptations. The first one is to develop renewable energy resources. The reason to continue this is because a major drain on the national economy is the import of liquid fuels for transportation and electricity generation. So, efforts to move toward renewable sources of energy are critical to building long-term and sustainable futures. In 2006, Fiji committed to the target of 60% of electricity generation to come from renewables by 2016, and this goal has been reached. The second one is to propose that any nation emitting greenhouse gases above its fair share level has a responsibility to find reasonable adaptation for the affected countries. The second national communication to the UNFCCC began its introduction on mitigation, mentioned that despite having a very small greenhouse gases emission profile, Fiji faces some of the worst effects from the climate change. The third one is that the Fijian government has promoted the reduction of greenhouse gases emission among its citizens.
Well, Ninos, we're no longer talking about climate change. It's already changed. We can never predict when mangoes are going to come out. We can no longer predict when particular fish are going to come through our waters. For us, it's about adapting to a climate that has already changed. We're still recovering from the cyclone that hit us. If you go to the top part of our island, it's completely wiped out. Our dance group, Rocco Pacifica, it means to share and to learn to pass knowledge on. So what we do is we perform and create an emotion from, and we touch others' hearts. After our show, we explain what we were dancing about and we tell them our story. Then it is a ripple effect. They tag us on Facebook and then more and more people hear our story.
Recommendations for Fiji's. First, work on its own natural resources for renewable energy. The first renewable energy is hydroelectricity. Mona Savu hydroelectric plant supplies about 400 gigawatt hours per year. This has saved around 800 million worth of oil. The average value for Fiji during the period 1980 to 2012 was 0.35 billion kilowatt-hours with a minimum of 0 billion kilowatt-hours in 1980 and a maximum of 0.53 billion kilowatt-hours in 2012. The second renewable energy is bagasse. When sugarcane is squeezed for its juice, a fibrous pulp material is left over. This material is processed into a usable form called bagasse. For each 10 tons of sugarcane crushed, nearly 3 tons of wet bagasse is produced. Bagasse is typically used to produce heat and electricity in sugar mills. The second one is to reach out to large greenhouse gases contributors for financial aid. Fiji only emit a mere 0.04% of greenhouse gas emission compared to the world average. With financial resources, Fiji will stop importing coal and petroleum products and strictly focus on local products for energy production.
One more specific recommendation for Fiji we made is to shifting their transportation energy source from diesel fuel to electronic. The majority of electronic Fiji generate are from hydroelectronic source. Fiji can ask technology support from China, who has the most advanced and widely used electronic motorcycle to replace the gas-based motorcycle they are using now. It will largely reduce the carbon dioxide they produce. The structure of both motorcycles are very similar. The technician and mechanic needs little time and few resources to adapt the technology of electronic motorcycle.
This is Xiaosong again. I will introduce the cost of recommendation in Fiji right now. The hydroelectricity destroys its ecosystem in Fiji, and the installation cost of the power station is very high. Its construction requires a lot of human capital and labor, and the maintenance is very costly. It may lead to floods in low-lying areas, and it will divert natural waterway. Also, it has bad effects on the agriculture in Fiji. This is my last part. Love you, Terry.
One of the main vulnerable groups in Fiji is women. Women are often hit the hardest by the effects of climate change. Women are the ones in Fiji who are collecting the water, the firewood, and the food in low-income settings, and they are often strained by anything that affects their local environment. Also, women grow many of the crops used to provide food for their families, so they must find new ways to feed their families after these tropical storms destroy their villages. The loss of income and food sources especially affects the health of pregnant women and babies who rely on nutritious food. And I found a fact that stated women are 14 times more likely than men to die during a tropical storm. And the reason for that is there is a lack of information and preparation for women during these extreme weather events. And women and young girls are especially vulnerable to violence and harassment in shelters. But women can benefit from our recommendation because our efforts to combat climate change will begin to decrease the likelihood of these dangerous tropical storms, which will protect the health and income of women in the villages of Fiji. And women will also be able to provide clean water and nutritious food to their families. And then also, importantly, the switch to renewable energy resources will create job openings for women, which can allow women to gain more power and recognition in Fiji.
A big vulnerable population of Fiji would be its indigenous people. The UN climate change reports warn Fijians to expect sea level rise in temperatures and more frequent and intense tropical cyclones. Fiji's indigenous people, they occupy a unique niche within the community regarding climate change. They live in communities with subsistence lifestyle, and any change severely affects their lifestyle. For example, hydroelectricity. Many dams are built across rivers in their territories, destroying their farmlands and flooding villages. It's hard for the population to combat against these policies when the majority of the world views hydroelectricity as a clean source of power that could be produced domestically, and Fiji's indigenous people lack political power. Educating Fiji's population about climate change, as was said earlier, and instilling in them environmental responsibility would allow the population to respond much more effectively to the effects of climate change, and then it would allow them to also manage their resources much more responsibly in the long run.
On the slides you can see anytime, and right now I want you to listen for music, the last one music in my part. Yeah, I think you will love it. 我住的城市从不下雪，记忆却堆满冷的感觉，思念到忘记霓虹照过喧哗的街，把快乐赶得好远。落单的恋人最怕过节，只能独自庆祝，尽量喝醉。我爱过的人没有一个留在身边，寂寞他陪我过夜。Merry Merry Christmas, Lonely Lonely Christmas。祝福不知该给谁，爱被我们打了死结。Lonely Lonely Christmas, Merry Merry Christmas。写了卡片能寄给心碎的像街上的纸屑。That's it. Yeah. You're surprised, right? Okay. Merry Christmas to you, Terry. Thank you for listening. Bye.